the man almost, that this personality had developed into such a strong.
Some songs are just hits, others are memories, but a few become something much deeper, healing, even when born from heartbreak. Tears in Heaven is one of those rare songs. It's stripped down.
Well, the first I knew was a telephone call from their apartment, and I was actually getting ready to go out of my hotel room to go and pick him up for lunch. And Laurie was on the other end of the phone saying, and she was hysterical, and she was saying that he was dead. And I could not let myself believe it. And I said, "What, are you sure? What are you talking, what do you mean? Are you sure?" And she said yes. And then his stepfather.
Just a quiet guitar, a voice that trembles, and words that carry more weight than most people could bear. When Eric Clapton performed it, the world didn't just hear music, it felt his grief.
And when I realized it was, you know, that real, I went cold, actually. I don't know if people can identify with that. People have experienced a similar thing, is that you shut down right away.
But how did it come to be? How did a man already scarred by addiction, loss, and broken love find himself writing one of the most personal ballads in rock history? And what tragedy could turn silence into a song that touched millions? To understand Tears in Heaven, we need to step back into Clapton's life before 1991, where triumph and turmoil walked hand in hand. By the late 80s, Clapton wasn't just a musician, he was a legend. He had played with the Yardbirds, helped form Cream, and carved out a solo career with unforgettable tracks like Layla. His guitar wasn't just an instrument, it was a voice that spoke for an entire generation. But behind the stage lights, things weren't as glorious. Clapton had lived through the deaths of friends and fellow musicians. Duane Allman, who helped shape the sound of Layla, was gone after a motorcycle accident. Stevie Ray Vaughan, another close friend, died tragically in a helicopter crash. Clapton carried those losses with him. And then there were his demons. In the early 70s, heroin nearly ended his career.
It was in the Stones. What else was there, you know? Until like 67, and then you had San Francisco. But you had to travel a long way to see a good rock and roll band.
He disappeared from music until unconventional treatments finally helped him pull through. Years later, alcohol became the next battle. By the mid-80s, he was drinking so heavily that sobriety seemed like a distant dream. I couldn't get through a day without doing something to alter my consciousness.
And it started with heroin addiction.
It started with sugar.
Sugar?
Oh yeah, when I was 5, 6 years old, I was cramming sugar down my throat as fast as I could get it down. Sweets.
Then something changed. In 1986, Clapton became a father. His son, Connor, was born, and suddenly he had a reason to fight. Clapton later admitted that staying sober wasn't about himself anymore, it was about his boy. He didn't want Connor to grow up remembering a father who was always intoxicated. That vow gave him strength, but as fate would have it, the darkest chapter of his life was still waiting. March 20th, 1991. A day that would haunt Clapton forever. 4-year-old Connor was in New York, staying with his mother. Clapton was supposed to take him to the zoo. It was going to be a day of simple joy, a father and son together. But when Clapton arrived, everything had already changed. A janitor had left a window open on the 53rd floor. Connor slipped and fell. The call Clapton received that morning shattered him. He later described the moment as feeling unreal, as if he had walked into someone else's nightmare. Instantly, emotionally withdraw. And I rushed out of the hotel, and I semi-walked, ran. I didn't want to run, because I didn't want to really believe it. I was sort of like trying to be casual, if you can imagine that. And I made it down to the street their apartment was on, and I saw ambulances and fire engines and paramedic vehicles, and that's when I knew
that it had happened. And by the time I got to their apartment, it was filled with policemen and paramedics. And it didn't seem like it was anything to do with me. I felt like I'd walked into someone else's life.
Accident that the child apparently wandered into the bedroom, wandered close to the window, and just by the fact that the window ledge was low, it appears that he just tragically fell out.
The funeral came just 2 days before his 46th birthday, and in the days that followed, he withdrew from the world. No stage, no spotlight, just isolation. Between England and Antigua, he grieved in silence. But silence can only hold so much. For Clapton, music became the one place where the weight could be released.
I think as close as I've ever been to anybody, really. It was probably the closest relationship I've ever, because I invested so much hope into it. And the last year of his life, I was struggling very hard to keep contact with him because I was working so hard. And I was seeing a change in him, you know, a change in his personality that I thought wasn't going to come, because, you know, when kids are like 2 and 3 years old, you think they're going to be bastards forever. And he really was a tough nut to, you know, to deal with. I mean, he had incredible energy and a very strong will, and was very, very hard to discipline. And I didn't know anything about that anyway, because I had no real role model to work with. And I don't know, I just started thinking, God, if this is being a father, I don't know if I can handle it. And then he started changing.
In the quiet of his grief, Clapton picked up his guitar. At first, the songs he wrote weren't for anyone else. They were letters he could never send. One of them, Circus Left Town, remembered the last night he spent with Connor at the circus. Another was Tears in Heaven. At the start, Clapton didn't plan to release it. It was too personal, too raw. But as he worked on the soundtrack for the 1991 film Rush, he was encouraged to share it. The song found its place there, not as a commercial product, but as a moment of truth. He co-wrote it with lyricist Will Jennings. Clapton had the title and the first lines, but he struggled with how to finish. Jennings, understanding the depth of what was being said, helped shape the rest. The lyrics wondered about a reunion in another place, asking if love survives beyond this life. For Clapton, writing it wasn't just about music, it was survival. He said later that songs like this worked almost subconsciously, helping him process emotions he couldn't face directly. Playing it gave him a fragile kind of peace.
Writing and playing almost immediately, and I found this acoustic guitar, which I'd had a long time, and I wasn't really working on the road or putting an album together, so I just started to write, just play, and it sort of calmed me down. It was a tranquilizer. It was a safe anesthetic, you know, it was a definite, I mean, that's why I think music is there, you know, and it worked for me.
Can you play us something that you feel is part of this healing process?
Yeah, we could play a bit of that. It's called Tears in Heaven.
When Tears in Heaven was released in early 1992, it didn't sound like anything else on the radio. No big production, no flashy solos, just a man, a guitar, and a story of loss. The song first appeared on the Rush soundtrack, but it was his MTV Unplugged performance that made it unforgettable. Sitting on stage, stripped of everything but the music, Clapton let the world into his private grief. Viewers didn't just hear the notes, they saw the pain etched into his face. The response was overwhelming. Tears in Heaven climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became Clapton's biggest U.S. hit. In the UK, it reached the top 5. Awards followed, Grammys for Record of the Year and Song of the Year.
Tears in Heaven, Eric Clapton.
Opportunity I had to meet these two wonderful people. It's fantastic. That's the best honor I've had so far.
But the real impact wasn't measured in charts or trophies. It was in the people who came up to Clapton and said the song helped them grieve their own losses. His personal tragedy had opened a space where others could mourn and heal. As the years passed, the song remained part of his journey. But it didn't just keep him connected to his son. It kept him connected to sobriety.
Addiction, you know, we're definitely sure that it was a sugar addiction. And also, it was a principle, you know, that if I didn't want him to do it, and which would cover a lot of areas. You know, I didn't want him also to sit at the dinner table and throw things on the floor. But what happened was that in his 4th year, he started to change, and he became this person that I actually had never known I didn't know this was going to happen. You know, I really didn't know enough about the situation to know that I was going to find another little human being talking to me with his own words, not just repeating things that he'd seen on TV or he'd heard other people say, but coming out of his own imagination, his own dialogue, and that was what I was waiting for, really.
Clapton admitted that Connor's death could have easily driven him back into addiction. Instead, it gave him the strength to stay clean. He also leaned into the family he still had. His daughter Ruth became a vital part of his healing. Spending time with her reminded him that life, though fragile, still had meaning. In 2004, Clapton made a surprising decision. He retired Tears in Heaven from his performances, saying that he no longer felt the same grief and couldn't sing it without that emotional connection.
Well, I suppose I don't want to deny that. I think it would be nice if it did, but I don't want it to be mawkish, you know.
For nearly a decade, the song was absent from his concerts, but in 2013, during his 50th anniversary tour, it returned. The grief had changed, but the song's meaning hadn't. It was no longer just his story. It had become something larger, something timeless. Tears in Heaven isn't just another ballad in Clapton's long career. It's the sound of a father's heart breaking and slowly finding a way to mend. It's proof that even in the darkest moments, music can hold us together when everything else falls apart. Clapton's life had already been full of loss and survival, but this song distilled all of it, addiction, recovery, tragedy, and love, into a few quiet minutes of music. And that's why it matters. It reminds us that grief is universal, but so is healing. So maybe the question isn't whether Tears in Heaven was Clapton's greatest song. Maybe the real question is, what songs have helped you through your hardest moments? Because in the end, Tears in Heaven isn't just Clapton's story. It's all of ours.